In the mid-19th century, Ireland experienced one of the most devastating humanitarian disasters in modern European history. Between 1845 and 1852, more than 1 million people died, another million people forced to flee their homeland. This catastrophe became known as the Great Hunger. While a fungal disease destroyed the potato crop, historians and contemporaries alike had argued that the famine alone does not explain what happened. As one 19th century observer wrote, "The Almighty brought the potato blight, but the English created the famine." Today, we're going to be talking about the British and the Irish and the quarrel in between and the famine and all the things that they didn't do. What did Ireland look like before the famine? It was a growing, stable community. Obviously, you had your poorer areas, but they were growing. It was roughly 8.5 million people at the time, one of the highest densities in Europe. Most were poor tenant farmers living under British rule, which happens when you get conquered by Britain, you know. The root of the system stretched back centuries. The British and the Irish have been going at it for hundreds of years. I still think we're going at it today. I'm not Irish. I am Irish. Technically, I'm American. England conquered Ireland and gradually stripped the Irish Catholics of political power, land ownership, and legal rights. The land was transferred to Protestant landlords, while the Irish were pulled into poorer western lands and forced to rent small plots to survive. Two Irelands emerged. To the east, especially around Dublin, wealth and British influence flourished. In the west, poverty deepened. Families lived in one-room huts, and they survived by farming small plots that could barely sustain them. The potato became central to survival. It grew well even in poor soil, and it fed an entire family. By the 1840s, about 1/3 of the population depended entirely on potatoes for food. This dependence made the Irish people vulnerable. Back to 1845, disaster arrived in the form of a fungus called Pylanthropum infans. I have no idea how to say it, so I'm going to put it on the screen and you can figure it out. The blight blackened leaves, rotted timbers, and spread rapidly through the air. The disease had appeared earlier in the United States and England. By the late summer, it reached Ireland, and half the potato crop was lost in the entire first year alone. Irish families were subject to now eating weeds and grass to survive. Hunger spread quickly across the countryside, and yet this was only the beginning. And you're probably thinking, well, what did the British do? Because they're under British rule, they're now considered like part of British, whatever. It's complicated. The British, they did respond, but cautiously, and within strict ideological limits. Again, in 1845, officials purchased 100,000 pounds of cornmeal to sell at reduced prices. The amount was so tiny compared to the value of the potato crop that was lost, roughly 3 million pounds. Relief required money, hunger required food, and access required political will. The British administration believed that deeply in laissez-faire economics, trying to be the United States. They were never us from the beginning. Should have stuck to their thing. The idea that markets should regulate themselves and that government interference would cause dependency. Charles Trevelyan, I think that's how you pronounce his name, the official placed in charge of famine relief, believed that Irish were responsible for their own poverty, described the famine as a kind of natural correction, and I quote, a mechanism for reducing surplus population. Guys, that sounds a lot like the G word. I'm not gonna say it, but that sounds a lot like that word, guys. Under his directions, relief programs required that people work for their food. But when you're already starving, it doesn't go well. Hundreds of thousands of people were put to work breaking stones and building roads, including children, in exchange for small rations, porridge, and bread. These rations were not nutritious enough to sustain life, but only to delay death. Even as the famine spread, Ireland continued to export food. Potato blight did not affect other crops, like grain, livestock, and meat remained abundant, and that meat was then shipped abroad under British free trade policy. The British government refused to halt exports, instead increased military protection for the food shipment leaving Irish ports. While people starved, livestock was getting better fed than the laborers who raised them. Because of the famine spreading, death became imminent. Victims were buried in shallow graves, sometimes without coffins. There was not enough wood or strength to bury the dead. Entire families died inside their homes. Diseases like dysentery, typhus, and scurvy followed starvation. As the famine deepened, landlords were expected to fund relief. Many refused. Instead, landowners used evictions as a solution. Tens of thousands were forcibly removed from their homes, often escorted by British troops. An estimated 500,000 people were evicted during the famine years. Some landlords paid for passage to America rather than continuing supporting tenants. These ships became known as coffin ships. These coffin ships were overcrowded, unsanitary, and deadly. Nearly 1/4 of passengers died during voyage. Despite the dangers, more than 1 million Irish people reached America. By the 1850s, 1/4 of New York City's population had been born in Ireland. Ireland's population fell from 8.5 million to 6 million by the 1850s, then continued to decline for decades. By the 1900s, it declined to 4.5 million people. Between 1851 and 1921, an estimated 4 million Irish people left the country in total. The famine permanently reshaped Irish society. Economically, culturally, and politically, we were scattered, we were dead, we were hungry. The famine didn't just leave mold and death in its wake, but it left a moral reckoning. A British Prime Minister acknowledged the failure, stating that those governing Ireland failed their people, causing a crop failure to be a human catastrophe. The Great Hunger is now understood not simply as a natural disaster, but as the result of political decisions layered on top of ecological crisis. The Great Hunger was not inevitable. It was shaped by human choices, by power, policy, and indifference. It remains one of the clearest examples of modern history how political systems can transform hardship into catastrophes. To understand the famine and the Great Hunger as a whole is to understand the suffering that is not only caused by nature, but by the decisions made in its wake. So that's British and Ireland and the famine. That's all I have. Kind of short, but thank you for watching. Thank you for taking the time watching my video. I have my sources linked down in the below if you want to read through where I got my information. Obviously, I'd love to hear other people's opinions on it, because I think there is a lot more to this story than what I've said. It goes a lot deeper, but this is at least something that I wasn't taught in school, and so yeah, this is something I had to hear and find out by myself. I knew about the famine, I just didn't know about how Britain contributed to that and what they could have done, or England, I guess. Anyways, thanks for watching. Y'all have a beautiful day.